Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar. We're here with our resident nutritionist Oscar Puig, and he's going to be talking to us about a very important topic called food as medicine and how we can use food to heal and treat metabolic disease. As you know, metabolic disease is a huge issue in modern day societies, and here at San Aviv, Oscar is really he's pretty amazing what he does, and a big part of, he laughs, but it's true. He really focuses on all these issues. He has these amazing talents and strengths, and he just really focuses on our guests and helps them go through all these lifestyle changes that they need to do through their diet and through their supplements to create these changes, amazing changes. So today I'm really excited to hear about everything that he's going to share with us as the importance of food in our healing. So I leave it to Oscar.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay guys, so good afternoon. Hi from all the way from Rosarito. So we're going to talk a little bit about food and how we can utilize it to address metabolic syndrome. I think we'll first explain what is metabolic syndrome and then go through the criteria of metabolic syndrome. And then from there, we'll go on to what will be the root cause of metabolic syndrome. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with what are definitions of, in this case, metabolic syndrome. Okay, so we have metabolic syndrome as a cluster of most dangerous heart attack risk factors: diabetes and prediabetes, abdominal obesity, high cholesterol, and high blood pressure. This actually said by the International Diabetes Federation. And as you see, all of them almost are similar. Even the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, the Mayo Clinic, and the American Heart Institute just says that all metabolic syndrome are just a cluster of conditions. Let's look at what we need to understand as metabolic syndrome. Okay, so the criteria for metabolic syndrome are the following. You really need to have about 30 inches or above in male, or 35 inches above in waist, circumference. You have to have 150 milligrams per deciliter of blood triglycerides or greater to actually be considered what is in this case metabolic syndrome. You have to have a lower HDL of 40 milligrams per deciliter for male and about 50 milligrams per deciliter for a female. You have to have, in this case, what is a high blood pressure, systolic blood pressure from 130 millimeters mercury over, in this case, 85 millimeters of mercury or greater in this case. And again, you have to have a fasting glucose of 100 milligrams per deciliter or greater. The issue I see with this is that I never really see all of them together. What I normally see is people actually having high blood sugar levels but no blood pressure, having low cholesterol but again no triglycerides. In this case, I'm talking about good cholesterol, right? Normally I see patients in normal weight, normal fat percentage with high blood pressure. So could we really consider this as metabolic syndrome? What would be really a root cause for all this if we get patients that are in the normal weights, normal fat percentage, and then again they do have diabetes, that have hypertension, or one or the other, right? So I don't really understand how we can classify them with all these 5 points if, again, we get patients that do not fall into the criteria and really are not actually metabolically responds to a metabolic syndrome type of condition. So let's find out a little bit about what is in this case. Okay, so here's stats that we're going to talk about. We have obese patients. Now, from, in this case, the whole population this is actually stats from the US. So 78.6 million of them, which equals to 34.9% obese patients in the US. 80% of them, of that 34.9%, have what is metabolic syndrome from obesity, which falls down to 60.28 million people. That's not a percentage, that was an error right there, guys. And we'll give an example of what is normal weights. 65.1% out of 157.2 million people with normal weights. Out of those 64.1%, 40% of these patients contain what is metabolic syndrome. So if we see the stats, 62.8 million people on a normal weight with metabolic syndromes makes us ask ourselves the question if fat really makes you sick. So going to the first point of you have to have a greater waist size to actually develop metabolic syndrome, and we're actually clearly seeing patients that are actually obese and in normal weight, the same number with actually metabolic syndrome. It begs the question that if there's something behind it, is it really just the fat that makes you sick, or is it a starter, or is it a signal of something else that's going on in your body? So let's go deeper into it and let's find out. So, to really understand what is in this case obesity, we really have to understand first what is the fat cell, right? As you see, you don't really get fat by getting more fat cells. You get fat by producing inflammation. Now, to in this case, the fat cell. Now, we have to understand that the fat cell is not a cell by itself that is a reserve of energy. It's an endocrine organ. As you see, it produces not only what is hormones, but it produces also a lot of inflammatory molecules and things that can actually even protect you against what is hyperglycemia or high blood sugar levels or even cancer. So now, when this big cell that you see there in the picture increases, all those other things that it produces also increase. Now, when anything increases, example like a hormone, it creates a disruption in hormones. As an example, we'll talk about leptin in this point. Now, leptin is a hormone that you produce to make your body, in this case, have a signaling of enough fat in your body to survive, or if your lower normal levels of fat are just being burned, it signals your body that you have to eat and you have to store more fat. So when you have more of this leptin molecule, it tends to disrupt hormones and create more of a communication to the brain that there's not enough fat. And you store more fat and more fat and more fat. Now, the reason here is that I want to make a point with this. This is where low-calorie diets do not really make a very big effort to make you lose weight or to cut down any metabolic response that your body may have. The reason why is because automatically when you go into low-calorie diet, your body automatically signals that there is not enough fat. So what it does, it stores more fat again, just because you're putting your body through shock. Remember that whenever you go onto a lower calorie diet, again, your body is not going to function the same way as it's supposed to function. So again, lower calories diets are really never going to work because they're going to create leptin resistance in the long term. So to prove this, I put this slide for you guys. We have this shot of a transverse MRI from the abdomen of male patients with the same waist circumferences right there. So clearly, if you can look at it, you can see obviously the white area being more the fatty tissue than anything else. Okay, so we have the same waistline, but again, we have more fat, more visceral fat than what is in this case love handles, okay, or subcutaneous fat. So normally what we understand is that when you have more visceral fat, it's actually more metabolically active and it's actually more dangerous to actually have this. But yet again, I can say that this is something that you cannot correlate against metabolic syndrome. It is a response from your body that is actually created by an imbalance. But again, this does not provoke metabolic syndrome. It is a response. It is a signaling. It's like when your body raises your cholesterol. It is a signaling of something, and we have to put attention to it. Now, it can produce inflammation, because obviously, as we saw, it produces a lot of molecules. It can disrupt your hormones, but yet again, it is not one of the sources or the reason for metabolic syndrome. So, to make you understand a little bit more clear on this, we have a patient or a group of patients that have a syndrome called lipodystrophy. Okay, this is a rare disease primarily that progresses with actually a loss of fat. So these type of patients don't tend to have a lot of fat, but they do tend to have particular things, including insulin resistance, diabetes, hyperlipidemia, progressive hepatic diseases, and anabolic state. So they tend to have high insulin, high diabetes in this case, fatty liver, and an anabolic state, which kind of sounds like if it was going down into the metabolic syndrome condition, right? When we look at metabolic syndrome, again, I'll repeat myself from the first slide, or second slide, our waist circumference has to be above normal to be considered metabolic syndrome, but these guys have no fats, so yet again, waistline is perfect. Triglyceride levels 150 milligrams, so they do tend to have that. Low cholesterol from HDL, they do tend to have that. They don't have high blood pressure, because it doesn't say right there, so you can really improve that. So fasting glucose with obviously a diabetes is normal above 100 milligrams, and almost 127 or above normal. So yet again, this is saying that fat by itself is not one of the triggers of what is metabolic syndrome. It can be a signaling of your body of something, but what is it? And I'll say on the next slide, I'll show you which one. I think by itself, insulin is one of the biggest triggers on our body that can disrupt hormones and can lead off to severe damage in our body. But if we have too much of it, obviously. But again, we have to understand how insulin works and the mechanism of insulin to what tissue it's actually associated to. So, actions of insulin. It does actually help you to uptake glucose into the muscle and into the fatty tissue. It does produce glycolysis or glycogen synthesis, which is basically burnout of reserve of energy, protein synthesis also, and uptakes of what is this case, especially potassium in this case, and phosphorus. So it stops gluconeogenesis, or production of new glucose, glucogenolysis, lipolysis, ketogenesis, and proteolysis. Easier to say in Spanish, right?
Yeah.
So to understand a little bit easier, let's go through a little bit of a picture. So when we have too much insulin, in this case, obviously secreted by the pancreas, it goes directly into the liver and basically produces what is in this case free fatty acid. Now, when we produce more free fatty acids than normal, we produce more lipolysis. Now, this increases triglycerides, increases VLDL also, increases inflammation and oxidative stress, increasing all these little molecules that we see on the right side, C-reactive protein, fibrinogeno, free fatty acids, things like that, that can lead off to type 2 diabetes and atherosclerosis, okay, or coronary heart disease, just by having too much insulin. Now, insulin is very selective, and it's actually selected to a certain amount of tissues. Specifically to the liver. Really, when we talk about insulin resistance, we really want to look at the liver as much as possible. Now, we know that insulin as itself, it's obviously something that's going to help to lower blood sugar levels, obviously because it's going to be deposited into different tissues. So the AHA recommends about 19 spoons of added sugar per day. That's about 45 grams of added sugar per day. So most of us that need to be visual, I'll give you a little bit of a visual right there. So it would be 2 apples, or it would be a can of Coke, which is really, really different, right? One contains fiber, pectin contains other nutrients, in this case vitamins and minerals and things like that. And the other one contains phosphoric acid, carbonated liquid, most probable high fructose corn syrup, and that's about it. But really, we want to understand the type of sugar that can trigger more insulin resistance than anything else. So we normally have 2 molecules that are constant in our diet. One would be glucose, and the other one would be fructose. One study showed that fructose actually leads higher ghrelin levels, which actually increases more hunger. So that increases glucose. That glucose, fructose, does not stimulate the satiety centers, in this case, in the brain, in the same way as glucose. So it actually leads to reduce,
Being satiated?
Satiated, thank you. A high consumption of fructose can actually cause insulin resistance. It can actually even cause abdominal fat gain. It can increase triglycerides. It can increase your blood sugar levels. And it can actually increase small dense LDL compared to the exact same numbers of calories of glucose. So, example, if you would eat 1 tablespoon of glucose, it wouldn't really produce that. It would produce high insulin levels, and it would actually deliver it to muscle mass and fatty tissue. But fructose by itself really skips pathways, and it can provoke more insulin sensitivity, which is affinitive to liver tissue. Now, when we go back to what is in this case high school, and we understand the TCA cycle, we see that glucose by itself goes directly into the cycle and produces ATP. But when we see fructose, fructose has a backdoor to introduction to this. Definitely goes to what is fructose kinase, and can go directly all to the way to PSERIRS1. That's creating insulin resistance. Okay, once we have that, that obviously affects the liver, affects triglycerides, affects dyslipidemia, affects nitrogen oxide levels, increases blood pressure, and increases hyperglycemia also. And then again, it affects a lot of issues in the body, creating more inflammatory molecules than anything else. Example, like lipid droplets. Okay? So, let's say you guys eat this. And if we see one common color, I'll ask Jonas here, because he's the only one next to me. What color do you see, Jonas?
White. And yellow.
You sure?
Well.
Isn't it brown?
Well, yeah. Brown, yellow, white.
Yeah.
More than a few colors. That's a tricky question, Oscar. It's a tricky question.
Okay, so the brownie color by itself is advanced glycemic endpoints in this case. Advanced glycemic endpoints can increase hyperglycemia in this case and damage what is mitochondrial factors, enzymatic factors, and non-enzymatic pathways in the body, creating ROS, a reactive oxygen species. Again, if you don't, I always say to my patients while they're here at St. Aviv, if you don't have enough antioxidants to produce superoxidimodasa, or in this case glutathione by itself, you really are not going to detain this molecule, and it's going to actually produce more oxidative stress, and it's actually going to damage vascular tissue just by consuming something that's browned. Okay, so example, anything that we eat brown, like a potato chip, can produce advanced glycemic endpoints. Okay, causing a little bit more sensitivity and causing obviously more inflammation in the body. So this begs the question: is a calorie a calorie? Now, Coca-Cola, the company in this case, says that really if you have calories, you just have to substitute the calories that you have to maintain a healthy diet. So if you maintain a 1,500 calorie diet, but it all comes from, in this case, sugar, candy, Coke, things like that. Now, it doesn't really matter unless the only thing that matters is if you keep 1,500 calories. That's about it. Okay? So, most of us, that we know about what is in this case a calorie versus a calorie, know that calories are very different, right? First of all, whole foods are very different because we want something that's nutritionally dense, something that's going to give you antioxidants, it's going to give you minerals, vitamins, phytochemicals. It's going to give you things that are going to provoke chemical pathways to be actually re-nourishing your body and renew your body, right? So to understand this, we know by itself that when we eat a protein, a fat, and a carbohydrate, we have 4 calories for protein, 4 calories for a carbohydrate, and about 9 calories for a fat. But metabolically, to burn those 4 and 9 calories, from those 3 groups, protein takes more energy to burn in your body. So naturally, this raises your metabolism. So when we eat a little bit more protein, I'm not going to say that you guys need to eat a cow or a high amount of protein, but just a little bit amount of protein in each meal, your body is going to be metabolically more active than anything else. So it's going to help you to lose weight eventually if you actually clean out your diet, put it into a whole food diet, have a little bit more of protein, and not really eat anything that's on the left picture that does not give you anything other than the stimulation of insulin. Now, I'm not going to batter what is in this case Coca-Cola, but 140 happy calories with a can of Coke, right? Happy calories, happy diabetes, right? So empty calories. The reason why I put this is because I want you guys to understand empty calories. The USDA says that empty calories can come from solid fats and added sugars. So again, solid fats, they consider solid fats as butter, coconut oil, tallow, lard, right? Nutritionally, when we look at them, they're dense in nutrients, specifically if they're treated well. Now, example, lard and tallow, if they're coming from animals that are grass-fed and they don't contain any of these chemicals that are added to animals, like genetically modified organisms, they are rich in vitamin A and vitamin D and other nutrients that can actually even help to boost your immune system. Example, coconut oil by itself. Now, added sugar would be, in this case, normal table sugar or high fructose corn syrup. So the USDA says that if you're physically active, you can increase your calorie intake, because obviously the more calories that you burn, the more calories that you have to intake. So you have a higher amount of empty calories that you can't consume, right? So if you're a female from 19 to 30 years of age, you're supposed to have a 2,000 calorie diet, so you can consume 260 calories of empty calories, right? That's actually 2 cans of Coke. Right? Males 19 to 30 years of age, 2,400 calories and 330 calories. That's actually even 2 cans of Coke also. But the other one was almost 2 cans of Coke. So they're letting you have things that can actually even trigger more inflammation, because yet again, empty calories by itself does not provide anything in your body. This would be a little bit of an analogy, right? I always do this here when I'm at an review. I always kind of I always tell my patients to look to food as an investment. When we have money that we've actually earned throughout our lives and we've worked hard for it, we go and, let's say, we put it into the stock market, right? And you expect that money is going to be worked and worked and worked to a point where you're going to have enough money, maybe 3 or 4 times or 6 times the amount, if you're lucky, the amount that you originally deposited, right? But you're not expecting to lose it. So when you eat empty calories, every time that you deposit your money, you lose it. You're wasting your money, your hard-earned money throughout your life. You're just wasting it, because it takes a toll on your body, because it robs nutrients. Okay? So empty calories are something that you completely need to avoid. Now, fructose by itself has recently been really studied, and we want to go into the understanding that because we saw the metabolic pathway of fructose and how it can actually produce other things. And this is something that I can prove to you, where fructose consumption has a risk factor for non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So obviously in long-term cirrhosis of the liver. In a study involving 49 patients with biopsy without cirrhosis and 24 healthy controlled, consumption of fructose was found to 2 to 3 fold times higher amount patients with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease as compared to controls. Patients with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease were found to consume 365 calories of fructose compared to 170 calories per day by controlled. So increased hepatic mRNA expression of certain enzymes necessary for control fructose metabolism, fructose kinase, and lipogenesis, fatty acid synthesis, or lipid droplets were found among patients with non-fatty liver disease. So, example, patients that would consume 2 cans of Coke would have a higher risk of developing what is in this case a non-alcoholic fatty liver disease than patients compared to consuming 170 calories, compared to those with 365 calories. Now, dietary sugars stimulate fatty acid synthesis in adults. Now, acute intake of fructose stimulation lipogenesis and may create a metabolic milieu that enhances subsequent esterification of fatty acids following to the liver to elevate triglyceride synthesis postprandial. So, metabolic syndrome, we talked about high glucose, and we had talked about low HDL, and we saw it on the last one, obviously producing fatty liver. This one now is showing that you produce high triglycerides, and one of the markers of metabolic syndrome was high triglycerides, right? So, an example for this, again, I'm not bashing Coca-Cola, guys, but this is a great example. Ingredients in it: carbonated water, high fructose corn syrup, caramel color, phosphoric acid, and natural flavors and caffeine. So 12 low ounce of Coca-Cola gives you 140 calories, but gives you 39 grams of sugar. All of them being higher fructose corn syrup. So if we think about, again, about how we metabolize and how fructose consumption is related to non-alcoholic fatty liver and high triglycerides, consumption of sugary drinks in the United States has gone ridiculously high. Overall, males consume an average of 178 calories of sugar drinks on any given day, while females consume 103 calories. Now, mean consumption of sugar drinks is higher in males and females at all ages except 2 to 5 years of age. Consumption of sugar drinks increases until you're 12 to 19 years and then decreases with age. So consumption of sugar drinks are lowest among older females against higher older males. Okay, so let's understand the trend. So since the 1960s, we've measured obviously what is in this case obesity prevalence, and we measured it all the way to 2000, right? So we have this clear example: high fructose corn syrup being introduced all the way from 1975 all the way to 1985, and its peak being really strongly correlated to the high obesity rate that we have. Now we have free fructose going all the way up, again following this tendency of obesity, and then we have total fructose. Okay, so free fructose, we will understand it as, in this case, fruit juice by itself. All right, so going all the way up, causing this big trend. Now we saw, again, non-alcoholic fatty liver, high triglycerides, and a very big trend on obesity just by consumption of total fructose in any patient's consumption or dietary habits. Now, we talked about how much soda is consumed on a daily basis. Now, gallons of soft drinks per capita in the U.S., and I want you guys to see the correlation of what is in this case obesity rates and what is the consumption of soda in the U.S. Very strangely correlated, right? Very strangely correlated. So the fattest states are in the U.S. are the ones that drink more soda. This is a body mass index of above 30. So going into obese type 1 all the way to, example, look, Mississippi obese type, that's obesity and morbidity. Morbid obesity. Right. So, any correlation? New cases diagnosis of diabetes among the U.S. 1980s all the way to 2010. And then we see the total sugar consumption from 1822 to 2005. Very strong correlation, right, between consumption of sugar and what is diabetes. So, again, we saw that the marker for metabolic syndrome was glucose above normal, above 100 milligrams per deciliter in this case. Now, to be diabetic, you have to be above 127 milligrams per deciliter, but very strong correlation with the more sugar intake that you consume, the more probability that you're going to be diabetic, right? Now, what scientists say about what is in this case sugar? It's a toxic substance that should actually be regulated as snuff and alcohol. It actually stimulates receptors in the brain, specifically when it comes to dopamine receptors. Neurotransmitter dopamine, it stimulates this part of the brain. So when we see a study, there was actually a study produced about how it stimulates certain receptors, certain opiate and morphine receptors in the brain, When you consume sugar, you become addicted to it because it stimulates these receptors. So once you're reducing sugar, you have the same symptoms as somebody that's trying to eliminate drugs. So you have the withdrawal effects of it, right? You have the depression effect of it just by consuming sugar. So what is the solution? What is the solution? Our guidelines, I included these guidelines, in this case, from recent research that I've done. Reading a lot, Dr. Wood's work. I would recommend that you guys do that. I would recommend that you avoid trans fats. I would recommend that you avoid too much protein, or in this case, amino acid supplements from what is BCAA, branched-chain amino acids, because again, they don't have this biochemical pathway to be actually burned as glucose. Normally through the liver, they actually go directly and actually are burned in the form of what is a different type of lipid. Avoid alcohol. Obviously, we know no alcohol is going to go directly to form what is in this case high triglycerides. And then again, avoid added processed fructose. Okay, and naturally, you saw the biochemical pathway, how it goes and increases this lipid droplets. So it's best to avoid as much as possible added processed fructose. Okay, when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about high fructose corn syrup, guys. Okay, so now, with all this information that I presented, I think it's necessary that if in this case you do have metabolic syndrome or you have any of the things that I actually said, for example, waistline being above normal, high blood glucose, let's say you guys have high triglycerides, you guys have high cholesterol, more LDLs and HDLs, you guys need to change your diets. There's no other way that you guys can face this, but you need to change your diets. In a recent study, 2013, and this is not to promote a paleo diet, but this is the study that I found, Paleolithic diet is more satiating per calorie than a diabetic diet with patients with type 2 diabetes. Now, they did say it's instrumental to weight loss, but it's also difficult to adhere to. Now, I can say by personal choices, I do stay on the paleo diet, and it is difficult to do because out in the real world, a lot of people do not follow, in this case, specific habits. I would not like to call it a diet. I think it's a lifestyle that you want to follow, because this is something that you want to follow for your health, to prolong and avoid what is chronic diseases that may be presented in your genetical code, right? So to consider your diet, you really need to eat whole foods, and when I say this, you guys need to eat dense nutrient foods. Anything that has empty calories should actually be chucked out your window from your house. You need to eat clean. You need to eat organic, pasture-fed, in this case, or grass-fed. You need to eat what is in this case no hormone, no antibiotic type of foods. You need to increase your consumption of vegetable, guys. Remember that vegetables pack a punch with antioxidants, enzymes, and minerals. And we need to eat more vegetables in the form of, in this case, normal vegetables, not root vegetables, because obviously they actually have a very low GI. So the more low GI that you have, obviously the more fiber intake that you have, the better. When it comes to root vegetables, just be careful. Consume a very small amount of them. They do pack a punch with starches. I would recommend to consume 1 to 2 portions of fruit per week, guys. Okay, you really need to lower the consumption of fruit, because sometimes you are fructose sensitive, so you need to be careful with that. If you guys have high uric acid, it's better to avoid, in this case, or to reduce fruit intake per week, okay guys? Consume healthy fats also. Have an abundance of fats. Remove that fatophobe chip that we've had implanted in our brains, guys, and you have to consume the whole array of fats, omega-3, 6, 9, and saturated fats, because your body requires it. Remember that we've evolved through ages, years in this planet, and we have evolved through eating different type of fats. You need to eat high quality proteins. Yet again, I'll repeat myself, good, no antibiotic, grass-fed animals with no genetically modified organisms in this case. Preferably, I would recommend that you eliminate grains, dairy, and soy products to help you just reduce inflammation in your body. These foods tend to be inflammatory, so specifically if you're sensitive. I do recommend that you eliminate it. And also, you really need to eliminate all added sugars. One of the slides said that 80% of all the products out there contain added sugars. 80% of all the foods out in the market contain added sugars. It would be best that you go to a whole food diet, meaning that everything that you eat is produced from whole foods. Now, what will be added to help you reduce what is in this case blood glucose and let's say certain lipids? There's a very good study on fenugreek seed with 100 milligrams in divided dosages was placed in the diet of 10 insulin-dependent type 1 diabetics between the ages of 12 and 37 years of age. What they found was that they had an effect on blood glucose and also on certain lipids. They actually reduced fasting blood glucose and improved glucose tolerance. That was a 54% reduction in a daily urinary glucose excretion. It also improved lipid panel by itself with a significant reduction. So fenugreek seed, you guys can actually even find it in tea form. If you guys like to drink tea, fenugreek seed tea is also available, and you can actually do that 3 times a day. So what else we can add? Cinnamon is always said with patients of diabetes to help them control blood sugar in this case. And I actually found a study of intake of 2 grams of cinnamon for 12 weeks and it reduced HbA1c. So to understand HbA1c, remember I talked about what it is, advanced glycemic endpoints, that brownie sugar effect. That's what HbA1c is in your body. Okay, so it helped to control type 2 diabetes just by adding 2 grams of cinnamon. Examples, if you guys do smoothies in the morning, add cinnamon to it and it will help. It wouldn't add 2 grams of it, but it would add a benefit to it also. Okay guys? So what else? Coenzyme Q10 and alpha-lipoic acid supplementation. Really a potential role in blood sugar imbalance and insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome. Administration of alpha-lipoic acid and coenzyme Q10 was found to notably suppress oxidative stress, nitrative stress, hyperinsulinemia, and insulin resistance. The results in animals suggested that coenzyme Q10 and alpha-lipoic acid may have a positive effect on markers of metabolic syndrome. Okay, so supplementing yourself with coenzyme Q10 and a little bit of alpha-lipoic acid can be effective to reduce insulin sensitivity in this case. And again, coenzyme Q10 I always recommend it for all my patients that are athletes and anybody that has cardiovascular disease. Coenzyme Q10 is necessary because actually the heart tissue is very retentive to coenzyme Q10, so I would recommend that you take it in a daily way. Now, not all fruits are bad, guys, and we have a list that, well, you actually can even Google it, fructose content in fruits. There's a study in the effects of grapefruit and weight loss and insulin resistance. There was 2 groups that they placed on consumption of fresh grapefruits 2 hours post glucose insulin levels were significantly reduced and insulin sensitivity was improved. This is study 2006, so this was actually done here in San Diego. So they're still suggested that among obese individuals seeking to lose weight include grapefruit as part of loss of weight, as a beneficial part of it. So to understand the whole thing, I really want to recap and I want to finish with saying that you guys have to be careful with the consumption of added sugar. It is important that you guys read all your labels, specifically to look for added sugars, because sugars come in many different forms and many different names, so I would recommend that you are careful with the consumption of sugar, specifically also added high fructose corn syrup, because now you see how detrimental it is in your health. We should be aware of this, and if in this case you do have a family member, a direct family member that has the same condition that we actually have said, let's say high triglycerides, high blood glucose, high waistline also, low HDLs, you really want to be careful, because it is in your genes. So epigenetics is big. It can stimulate that same breakdown. So I would be careful and try to clean your diet as much as possible. Paleo diet can be an option for you guys, or just reduction in the general food groups that we said to start would be a big step. Okay, guys. So diet is critical on this. So I'll ask you guys, Do you guys have any questions? Thank you very much for attending this webinar.
It was really interesting and scary
I know,
at the
right?
same time.
I know.
Very scary. So there is one question, Oscar, and I know you love to scare people. That's kind of your personality.
No, I don't like to scare people. Come on.
I'm just joking, dude. Okay, there was this question from one of our listeners, and hopefully you'll write some more questions. We'd love to answer those. We have some time to do that. What about the recommendation of having 1 cup of berries each day? From what you're saying, this sounds like that might not be compatible with what you're recommending.
I think for the normal person, it's a great antioxidant food. It's really rich in antioxidants. But if you're already sensitive to what is in this case blood sugar management, I think it would be something that you do have to take in mind and maybe reduce the consumption. Maybe try to reduce it to maybe once or twice a week to really see if there's any improvement. I think something that we never measure in the general aspect of, let's say, of medicine, we never really measure insulin, and we never really measure what is fasting and also a natural insulin curve, which can actually even say a lot of the patients. I think when it comes to the berries, again, I will go back to the first comments of the say they're actually very rich in antioxidants, but you still have to be careful because there's still a carbohydrate and they still contain fructose and sugar by itself. So I would say maybe 1 to 2 cups in smoothies per week would be effective. If in this case you do have metabolic syndrome.
Yeah. Just
or
kind of
if
find
you
that
do
balance.
have the criteria for metabolic syndrome. Right?
Okay. We have another question here. How can I eliminate grains? What can I use as a substitute? That's a good question.
That's a really good question. I think in what form of substitute are you looking to introduce? What are you trying to substitute for? For example, normally when patients take grains, the most thing that they miss is bread.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's always pastas also.
Yeah.
There's always alternatives for pasta. Spaghetti squash is actually very, very easy to do. Zucchini, we have a mandolin where we produce our own spaghetti from zucchini. You guys can look for a mandolin on Google in this case and produce your own spaghetti. When it comes to breads, you guys can do paleo bread. There's zillions of recipes on the internet for paleo bread. It's a good substitute. I would just for the transition in this case, I would do it for a while, but then kind of wean it off as much as possible. And root vegetables can be a good option. For example, those athletes that are trying to remove grains, that are trying to kind of just build up their carbohydrate intake after physical activity, I think root vegetables would be perfect also. Now, example, for those that are Latin speaking, Mexican Americans or Mexicans, tortillas, you still have to eliminate them because corn, even though it's considered a vegetable, it's still, in this case, something that you have to eliminate. We have really good recipes of what is flaxseed tortillas that you can add and make tortillas out of them. It can be a substitute.
Another question on fruits, and I think it comes back to what you just said, but if you could just kind of say it again.
Maybe
why do we have to eat so small amounts of fruits? Aren't they healthy?
Yes, they're healthy. Again, they're healthy because they do pack good amount of antioxidants, minerals, hydration levels, or water levels, if you want to call it that way. But yet again, you don't really know, your biochemistry unless obviously you present a chronic disease. The sad thing about us is that we can go through our lives, eating whatever, and until we present a condition, we modify our diet. So we really need to learn how to listen to our body. I think you can really look at that by looking at your parents and your grandparents. If you look at that and they had diabetes, you really need to reduce all the factors that can produce diabetes. And we already saw that. We saw fructose, a very strong correlation, affinitive to specifically liver to produce more fatty tissue and more insulin resistance. Right? So fruit by itself does pack a good amount of antioxidants and everything else, but the cost of it is way too much for somebody that's sensitive.
Got it.
Okay.
So if you're already on that path, avoid it.
Just avoid it, reduce the consumption. Not avoid it 100%, but reduce the consumption to maybe 1 or 2. And I will always prefer that you eat a whole fruit instead of drinking fruit juice.
Sure.
Okay? Yeah. Because sometimes they consider fruit juice a portion of fruit, so you have to be careful with that.
It's not.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. Here's one. I only have the high blood sugar, but none of the other symptoms. Should I limit my fruit intake to 1 or 2 portions a week? That seems extreme to me.
I would say most definite.
Okay.
You do need to do that. But high blood sugar level can also be triggered by not sleeping correctly.
Yeah.
So you produce gluconeogenesis by hormones in your body that stimulate the liver to output sugar. So if you're constantly stressed and you're constantly on the sympathetic mode of your nervous system, you're going to output glucose in an anaerobic way, in the non-oxygen dependent way. So let's say you have 100 milligrams per deciliter of glucose, it can also be associated with dehydration also, or in this case, chronic pain by itself. So there's many factors that you have to consider. You have to basically eliminate all those factors that I just said. Sleep correctly, hydrate correctly, and if it doesn't go down, try to reduce your consumption of fruit and see how that actually works for you.
Okay. Yeah, and I think one of the things, folks, that we really want to share with you is that all these issues are really not as simple as it might seem. I mean, right now you just gave us 4 or 5 different reasons why this could be happening. I think that's one of the important aspects of Sana Vive and what we do here, because we do go to the bottom of things. We use all the testing, all the expertise of our practitioners to really get to the bottom of, okay, you have high blood sugar. Why is that? Maybe it's not the fruit, maybe it's not this, maybe it's all these other things. And I think that's really important to say. It's not as easy as just saying, point A goes to point B and that's it.
Yeah.
There's so many other things going on.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So, folks, we're gonna end it right here. Thank you so much, Oscar. Because we're out of time. We will be, I want to share with you the screen of the next webinar we're going to be having next month. And this is called Living Without Back Pain, which is a really, really important issue. How spinal hygiene can improve your health, by one of our resident chiropractors, Elizabeth Hernandez. She's amazing. We'll be talking about this next month. So I will be here with her next month. Thank you so much for joining us, folks. Have a great day, and we see you soon.
Thank you guys. Take care.
Take care.